Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Had this angel lost his mind? All the Marys were doing on that morning was walking to Jesus' tomb. Their friend, their Lord and their teacher, had been dead for 3 days. They had seen him enter triumphantly into Jerusalem, only to be arrested and crucified a few days later. There was a lot to be afraid of that week, including the uncertainty that the disciples and the Marys were facing. Would Jesus be raised from the dead like he said he would be? Or was it all over for him and for them? There was much to be fearful of as they walked to the tomb that morning. And things got scarier and more strange the closer they got to it. Out of nowhere, there was an earthquake and a flash of light. And then some Yahoo in white came out of the sky and hurled the huge stone away from the tomb. Talk about scary. The guards couldn't even handle it. These big Roman guards fell to the ground, and we're told that they're basically in some catatonic state after seeing all of that things that happened right then. And yet, there the angel patiently sat, waiting for the Marys to take it all in. In fact, we don't hear a single word from these women's mouths, not directly, in this entire text. But the angel, well, he just can't seem to shut his mouth. But that's because he has a lot to say. Don't be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus, but he's not here. He's been raised from the dead, just like he said he'd be. Go check out the tomb. He's really gone, but no longer dead. Go and tell everyone that he is alive and that he'll meet you in Galilee. Well, we hear the Marys are so astounded that they run off to go do as the angel commanded. Their fear isn't gone, but they're absolutely ready to share some good news. And it only gets better. Jesus himself meets them along the way, also with words of comfort and a command to go and tell his brothers what they had seen. It was certainly a new and good day that the Lord had made, and these two ladies were certainly going to rejoice about it, even though they were still a little scared. All throughout Matthew's account of Jesus' resurrection, we kept hearing these words, fear and joy. And because we hear them so much, I'm pretty interested in them today. How many of us here in this place could honestly say that we enjoy being afraid? And not the kind of afraid that we get when we watch horror movies or something. Really afraid. Maybe some of us do, but I know I don't. My heart races. I want to run away. And in the past, I've found fear of some things to be almost crippling. What I mean is that fear of something has prevented me from really living sometimes. And I just don't like that. So I have to wonder today, what is Matthew getting at here? And what did the two Marys actually witness that day? The difference for these two women was an experience of fear mingled with joy. Fear of seeing the angel bust onto the scene out of nowhere, and fear at seeing Jesus, their Lord who they thought was dead, alive again. The unthinkable, the supernatural had happened. And still they feel like they have to do something. Their fear doesn't paralyze them. Jesus has been raised by the power of God. Hallelujah, Jesus is risen. They may not have understood what was going on really, and they were afraid. But Jesus was alive, and there was, and still is today, an unspeakable joy about that. In some ways, I think we could liken this fear and joy combo to what it must feel like to first become a parent. Fear that you are the one or ones responsible for nurturing this little wiggly crying person. Fear that you'll somehow mess up and hurt their future. And yet, an unspeakable joy that you get to love and nurture this person for the rest of your life. Or for those of us who aren't parents, it could be like starting a new job or transitioning to a new phase in your life or in the life of your community. There would be a lot of unknowns and a lot of fear of the unknown, but excitement about whatever is going to come next. Those sorts of feelings are what I am convinced the Marys experienced on that resurrection day. Add to that fear that the disciples wouldn't believe them, because at that time, women weren't considered credible sources for witnessing anything. But their joy isn't overridden by that fear. We know what happened next. They went and told the disciples what they saw. And Jesus did indeed appear to them all. He even famously told them that it was their turn to go out and make disciples around the world, to spread his message of God's kingdom, the resurrection, and the forgiveness of the sins of all. Talk about fear mingled with joy in spreading that message. But the disciples and the Marys before them had that great news to share. And we do too. We have that same good news to share. We too are called to witness to where we see the risen Christ in our world. We too are called to preach, teach, and to heal the hurts of the world and of the people around us. That's a big task. It's a big task that sometimes seems too big for us to handle. And our fear of what others might think, or our fear that we might somehow not witness to Jesus correctly, might get the better of us. But those fears don't have to. Because Jesus has been raised for us, all of those things that we fear don't have the final say. The Marys didn't have to live in fear of what would happen to them if Jesus wasn't resurrected, because he was. We, in turn, don't have to live in fear of illness, rejection, death, or whether or not we'll be a good parent, friend, spouse, worker, whatever we are, for that same reason. The power of the risen Christ is more powerful than any fear we have, or anything that could ever try to take God's place in our lives. Through the risen Christ, we are given courage to face whatever is ahead, because we don't face it alone. So does that mean our lives need to be some big party with our Jesus shields up, so that we can take down any foe that comes our way? Not necessarily. What I mean is that because Christ has been raised from the dead, we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to stay in our happy little Christian boxes where we're comfortable and where we are confident that Jesus will protect us from everything out there. It's true that Jesus does walk with us and does protect us. That is absolutely true. But he also gives us courage to go and do something about what we profess to believe, about who he is, and the grace and reconciliation he brought to the world. The two Marys could have stayed at his feet all day worshiping him. They could have said that they were too afraid to go and tell the others that he had been raised. But they didn't. They went out in spite of their fear and in great joy and told the disciples that their brother was on his way. We could very easily say that we don't know enough about Jesus to be able to tell others about him. We could very easily stay home from the time we are children and not try to live into being whoever God has called us to be. But really, that's not what I see when I encounter so many of you each week. In this place, I see so many people who might say at one time that they're not sure that they'll be a good Boxing Wednesday teacher, a competent council member or deacon, a good member of the women's group, or a solid property committee member, and so many other things. But everyone here still goes out and does and is these things in this church community. And you do similar things in your lives outside of these walls. I see people who know that it's okay to be afraid sometimes and be a little uncertain of how to be a Christian in this world. But I don't see a people who lets that fear rule them. I see children of God who have so much joy and love for the risen Christ that you're excited and eager to share that good news. And by doing that, and being all of these things, you all witness to the risen Christ, to your brothers and sisters in this place and outside of it. When we do that, there are some things to fear. We might fail, we might get sick or get hurt, or we might unintentionally hurt someone else. But just as we read in this text, the joy in proclaiming and witnessing to who Jesus is and to what God is doing in the world is stronger than that fear. Not because we've got a handle on everything perfectly, but because Jesus has a grip on us and is never going to let us go, no matter what. He's always with us, ready to jump into new places with us as we go out and tell the world in our own ways that He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Amen.